Today we're going to talk about the America and its problems, which is my favorite topic because there's a lot and I know them all. For example, a lot of people talk about income inequality in the United States. Income inequality is the biggest problem that we all have to fight. We don't know how to solve this issue, but there's a big problem, income inequality. And I just want to, and everybody's like agreeing, yeah, that's a big problem. And if you think that income inequality in the United States is a big problem, you're completely missing the point. About 10% of top earners in the United States, I'm going to slow down because there's going to be a lot of information. 10%, top 10% of American earners make about 45% of all income. And if you think that is bad, that the top 10% make almost half of what everybody else is making, that might seem bad. But then wait until I tell you about something that is really important, which is wealth inequality gap. So we already know that 10% of top earners make 45% of income, and if we can kind of squint our eyes and make the eyebrows like this and then say, no, this is bad. But at the same time, in America, 1%, not 10, 1% of the top wealthiest people, it seems like I have to educate you on the difference between wealth and income because you guys don't have the majors in economics. But that's fine. That's why I'm here. 1% of top wealth earners owns 30% of all wealth. So when the 10% of top earners make 45% of all income, 1% of owners possess 30% of all wealth. And that's called wealth gap. And they're hiding behind the earnings reports, which they're not doing. And if you think that's bad, the top 10% of wealth holders hold about 70% of all of the American wealth. So that is the difference right there between the earned income inequality and owners' wealth inequality. So if you're talking about income inequality, I don't know what you're doing. You're not making any sense and nobody cares. You're just diverging. You're just diverging. Those things don't matter. Income doesn't matter in this country. But let me tell you this. You might say that 10% of top wealth holders have 70% of all wealth in America. This is outrageous. But wait until I tell you about India. In India, 1% of the wealthiest people own 70% of all wealth. I mean, I know there's not a lot there. But just imagine the disparity. Right? You're talking about the income inequality, which is just 10% make half. I'm talking about wealth inequality when 10% own twice as that, 70%. But in India, just 1%, not 10%, 1% owns 60% of all wealth in America. If this is too hard for you to understand, if you're just coming from TikTok or you're kind of in that kind of mind space where like real information just skips over your head, let me just translate it to you in TikTok terms, okay? What I'm trying to say is imagine apples, and everybody has apples. And so what I'm trying to say here is in America, 10% of the richest apple farmers, apple holders, apple gatherers, they own 10 people out of 100. Out of 100, 10 people have 70 apples. Right? And that's crazy. Because the rest 90 people have 30 apples. In India, one person out of 100 has 70 apples. And for the rest 99 people, there is only 40 apples left in India. But at the same time, I'm thinking, it's not that bad. It is not that bad, even in India. In America, where there's 10 people have 70 apples and all the rest, 90 people have 30 apples. And in India, one person has 60 apples and 99 people have 40 apples to share and to cut into apple meals. At the same time, I'm thinking, it could be much worse. It could be that one person in America had 99 apples, 98 apples. And all the rest of us, all the rest 99 people would have one apple to share. That would be worse. So in a way, I feel like we must be kind of grateful. We must be grateful that in America, 90% of bottom earners have at least 30 apples to share, because it could be much worse. So we are thankful on this channel that those people don't take all of the apples, because I feel like they could. So I'm happy that they don't. So, but the wealth inequality is a real issue, and we can go even further. We can do even better here. We can talk about something called leveraging assets, which is a concept where people have those apples and they leverage them to take equity loans. Equity loans. And you can just live off the equity loans, and you don't have to make income at all. And that's basically how people with wealth hide behind the wealth and not reporting the wealth that they have, because they don't have no income. They just have, let's say you have $1 million worth of a house, which they have much more than that. But let's just say, on a level that we can understand, you have $1 million worth of a house and you have zero income. You just take $1 million in loans and you just live off of that. And you have zero income and you don't have to pay taxes. So that is the concept of leveraging assets, where people live off loans without paying any taxes because they don't have any income. And the crazy part is, if you have $1 million worth of asset that you can take out a loan, that doesn't matter. Because if you have billions of dollars, like a lot of these people do, you can take loans against your assets at much lower rate. Not just than everybody else, but much lower rate. So the rate could be, if you have a lot of assets and you want to take an equity loan, the loan would be about 3 to 5%. That could be even lower. That's just what I know. It could be 3-5% annual percentage rate. And here's an interesting part. In the capital markets today, you can make about 8 to 15% moderately per year. So if you have enough assets and you can take out loans at about 3 to 5%, and you just have that work and you don't have any income anyways, all of that is just your money, and you put that in the market at about 8 to 15% of income, then you generate all the rest of your money, you cover your interest, and you just have free income without ever paying taxes for any of that. At the same time, you accumulate wealth. You keep accumulating wealth. Because when you take $1 billion at 3 to 5% and you make 8 to 10% or 15% per year, there's enough money for you to live off, and you don't have to pay taxes because that's not income. And then you reinvest the rest of your money into generating even more wealth, so then you can borrow even more because now you have more equity. But that's not all of the fun of how the wealthy people get by in this country, how they not pay anything to anyone. There's also something called a step up in basis. And that's very interesting. So not only you can just have a lot of assets, take loans, live off of that, never pay taxes, and just accumulate wealth, what you can also do is when you transfer, so this is essentially a wealth transfer loophole in this economy, in this country, where people, okay, let me just simplify this a little bit. Let's say you bought a house for $1 million and then you die in 70 years and now your house is worth $30 million. So if you sell the house, you owe the government a taxes on $29 million. The difference. But the interesting thing is, if you transfer that asset, that house, to your heirs, it's called an inheritance transfer, asset transfer. So that thing triggers the step up in basis procedure, which means that it just resets the capital gains on that house. In other words, if some person bought a house for $1 million and then when he dies, he's going to pass it on to the other generations, and now that house is $30 million, the person who receives the house, if they're going to sell it that day for $30 million, the house that was bought for $1 million, they're not going to pay taxes because of something called step up in basis. And what all of this means and how the wealth gap in this country is created is people buy assets like a house, maybe $1 million, maybe $10 million, a long time ago, and then they take the loan against that house for 3 to 5% of APR. Then they go into the market, and with that loan, they make 10 to 15% income, pocketing all of the rest minus interest rate, just pocketing. And then their assets grow in price, and they just leave this all to their families. And now the families have this house, which is now 30 times more money. So basically, people with money take loans, make a lot more money, pass it down to the generations, and the generation that received all of that don't have to pay any taxes. Long story short, okay? So if you think about income inequality in the United States today, you're a dummy. You don't know anything about anything, because the real issue is how wealth is generated, multiplied, deferred from taxes, and passed down to generations, and they just keep going. And that's why you can't buy